Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome everyone into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. How you doing? Welcome into the program today. We have a full show of computer and technology news, and hey, we hope everyone out there is doing well. You had a great Halloween and you had a great weekend, and really appreciate everyone sticking around for this past week where we had Best of Computer America. And hey, we are happy to bring you full on Computer America for a lot of the rest of the year. Obviously, for just so anyone who is curious, the next Best of Computer Americas should include, I think, the Thursday and Friday of the Thanksgiving weekend. And then, of course, we take our longest break that we take here on the program between Christmas and New Year. And I need to double check the calendar, but it's probably going to be a day before Christmas Eve, and that's going to run all the way until probably somewhere around January 2nd. So just a heads up for everyone, and you can, of course, check out computeramerica.com where we will have all of that posted. So everyone, hey, once again, welcome. Hopefully you had a great weekend and you are ready for the show. computeramerica.com, that's where you'll find everything, including past shows, future shows, everything you need to know, including the podcast directory. If you can't find us live on IRN, then wherever podcasts are heard is the next best place, and you can find that at Computer America. While you're there, also be sure to check out articles, reviews, show notes, social media links, all that good stuff. Website's very easy to use, and we highly encourage you to do that. Also, we have the live video portion where you can check us live on twitch.tv/Computer America. Okay, morning announcements done. Everyone sit back, relax as we get ready for computer and technology news brought to you by Computer America. So a lot that we could cover here. I think we are going to cover, Facebook. And we have a number of Facebook-related stories, and we're going to go ahead and start there. And the first thing we're going to cover is, of course, over the week. We mentioned this at the very beginning of the week. Facebook was looking to rename themselves. I think everyone is really used to the Facebook company, and well, much like everyone's drawing comparisons to it. Much like Google and Alphabet, we are now looking at Meta. And Meta is, of course, going to be the overarching company that's going to include Facebook property. It's going to include Instagram property. It's going to include their chat app, which is WhatsApp, I believe. It's going to include pretty much everything. Oh, and of course, Oculus. Everything that Facebook does is now going to be under the umbrella of Meta. Well, looks like it actually went through, and even though it's a horrible name that's, pretty ambiguous, you can, of course, see that there. They're saying that Zuckerberg's Meta Endgame is monetizing all human behavior, and really, this is the question everyone's asking: why would Facebook do this? Obviously, Facebook, the company, the social media company, is the largest entity that they have. Makes the most money, has the most users, so why bother restructuring everything to fit this? And the short answer is, well, the metaverse. And we talked a little bit about that if you missed that show. The metaverse is this idea that whatever you do, it should be done socially. You have your real life, you have your online life, and then, of course, Meta is looking to blend the two together, where you can do things with your real-life friends in a social, online, virtual space, and you just exist in this weird metaverse that has all the appeal of real life and all the appeal of the virtual stuff and none of the drawbacks, or so they hope. Now, obviously, Facebook bought Oculus and its much hyped Rift headset for $2 billion back in 2014. It wasn't clear exactly what the social media company had in mind for virtual reality. Now we have it, and the answer is, personal data. Because when you have the social media's virtual reality headset on, it's tracking everything from your eye motion to what you pay attention to, what apps you like, how you play these apps. All of that data is collected for a number of reasons. One is, of course, for usability, so that they can improve the experience of the Oculus Rift and things like that. Another one is, and probably the biggest one, is advertising. They know that, virtual reality users who are of this age in this location in these countries prefer apps like this. This is what catches their attention. This is what they kind of gloss over. Here's how we can better monetize advertising within this platform to these people. It's a super hypersensitive way to track data. Now, the announcement of Meta, the company's VR and AR forward rebrand, is the culmination of a vision that should have been obvious from the start. In 2021, Facebook's colonization of social data has eclipsed the internet as we know it. And of course, and this is from Motherboard and Vice, Janice Rose in particular, saying that And its ambitions now demand the creation of a new reality where intimate data about our social and physical behaviors can be captured and exploited for profit. Which, there's no lying. Facebook, that is how they make ungodly amounts of money, is capturing private information, private data. During the tech demo in 2016, CEO Mark Zuckerberg described VR as the next major computing platform. And as the author wrote at the time, this could only mean one thing. Zuckerberg wants to build virtual environments where all human behavior can be recorded, predicted, and monetized. They even have a nice little excerpt. They even have a little excerpt from the actual presentation, which you could have watched on Facebook. I'm sure that so many of you did. Now, they mentioned that at the time, the company told me that it had no current plans to use physical motion data like head and eye movements as a means of predicting behavior and serving ads. Since then, it has made logging into Facebook mandatory, which was a big tip-off to these people. They made logging into Facebook mandatory for using their social media headset, and earlier this year, the company announced its inevitable entry into VR-based advertising. Now, while the bait and switch is a familiar and unsurprising move, and honestly, it wasn't even like a bait and switch, they just said no current plans, that does not mean never going to monetize this thing. And hey, it's Facebook. If you expect Facebook to be a benevolent entity that's just trying to bring new technology to the masses, I feel like bait and switch is a little bit hard. If there's a giant sign that says, this bait here is poison, is that really bait and switch? Is that not just the poisonous apple that Facebook has served to you? Now, they said that the announcement of Meta proves that there is no stopping Zuckerberg's plans to mine every human interaction in the world for data that can then be monetized. With Meta, it's safe to assume the predictive algorithm at work will be function the same as its predecessor. Data is collected about human behavior, which is then used to build profiles on users and automatically prioritize content that they are more likely to interact with. This is how Facebook got into so much trouble with these algorithms. They're very good. They are extremely capable, which is why you had the escalation of, let's say, politics. You had people would engage in politics. Someone would say something that they didn't like. It was from a political perspective that they weren't a part of. And so they would click on things that would paint them in a more negative light. And thanks to confirmation bias, when their feed is flooded with nothing but stories that they are more likely to engage in, politics got more vitriolic. It's, we've seen it time and time again. That's just what Facebook does. They peddle the insane, the conspiracy theory. They peddle the controversial topics. That's how they make their money. It's that engagement. So yeah, they're going to take that to the nth degree. If you engage with a particular type of advertising, you are undoubtedly going to see more of that. Now, data, they mentioned that Facebook itself proved the effectiveness of emotional contagion experiment it secretly conducted on users in 2012, which showed that changing a user's feed to show positive or negative content altered the types of content that they were likely to post, which you could also look at Instagram. It's very much the same thing, very, very negative when people just are bombarded with certain types of content. Now, this type of algorithmic manipulation forms the core business model of Facebook and countless other apps and social media platforms. As one anonymous Silicon Valley data scientist put it in 2015, the goal of algorithmic social platforms like Facebook is to change people's actual behavior at scale, identify good and bad behaviors, and develop ways to reward the good and punish the bad. So essentially, nudging people and to do what you like. And essentially what Facebook likes is click on things, share things, and consume. Now, they said that researchers have found that algorithmic nudging is possible in embodied virtual spaces too, where the collection of intimate data about physical body movements provides new ways to influence human behavior on a large scale. Companies like Real Eyes have marketed AI that they say can predict human emotions by analyzing body language and facial expressions. That's a big one. They claim that it's fiercely contested by AI experts, but being widely deployed anyway. In one notable study, researchers determined that AI-controlled digital avatars can be used in virtual spaces to push people into accepting certain political views. When I first started to watch content that was, built for VR, and once you experience it yourself, that's kind of the fun thing about VR, is that you don't need hyper realism to get that reaction. You just need a representation of something, and your brain just runs with it. Just like the subtle sensation that you are being swung back and forth on a carnival ride. Even though physically you're not doing anything, your eyes perceiving that, your reality is moving just like a swing would, again, with a carnival ride, makes people nauseous. Just a subtle plank and, on a flat ground with some VR makes you think that you're walking high up on top of skyscrapers. I mean, even just people sitting in a virtual movie theater and having virtual avatars that don't look like people at all in the seats next to them makes people feel like they are doing a social event. It does not take hyperrealism to get people to think a certain way. Now, in other words, Meta represents a massive investment into the kind of algorithmic manipulation for which Facebook has been repeatedly maligned. There you go. So, meanwhile, the company has been on a charm offensive to sell its new vision. Zuckerberg spent the bulk of his presentation showing off a VR-centered social platform where avatars live a utopian Sims-like existence, filling their virtual house with digital items purchased from an online marketplace. In the grand tradition of Zuckerbergian cringe, the newly rebranded company spent the rest of the day sending thirsty replies to popular brands on Twitter. There you go. So, and I'm guessing they're hoping that popular clothing companies and furniture companies will, of course, try to sell virtual goods just like their actual physical goods in their marketplace. So, but despite the name change, Meta remains as Facebooky as ever. Zuckerberg's company pioneered the art of collecting data and using it to capture our attention for profit, regardless of the social cost. Meta seems intent on making this new reality just as, I can't say that word, crappy as the old one. There you go. Very well written, and I agree with a lot of it. I mean, Meta is... Will people go for it? I mean, it's still part of a technology that we don't really have a user base for. Clearly, they're jumping in, both feet. They're trying to really stress that virtual reality is the next form of computing. Just like sitting at a terminal and punching away at a dumb terminal, sending your code off and bringing it back. I mean, that was one way. And then phones and smartphones, making them portable. The home PC, bringing the computer into everyone's home. And it seems like Zuckerberg really believes that VR is that next iteration of technology. For his business and his company and how he and his higher ups really see things, it is the next form of computing because that brings you data that you've never had before. And I mean, like tons of data that you would have never had before and no other way to capture it other than literal cameras pointed at every one of your users. Is it a bad thing? I mean, there's a lot of promise. The amount of education, information that can be imparted in VR, and it is a cool technology. Will Facebook do it right? And by right, I mean ethically? No, undoubtedly not. But hey, that's kind of their MO. And in keeping with Facebook in the first part of the show, we have a couple of stories like this one. This one from NBC News. And check this out. Documents reveal that Facebook targeted children as young as 6 for its consumer base, taking a page out of the tobacco industry's playbook. Get them young, get them addicted, and they'll be a customer for life. Internal documents show that Facebook has been actively hiring employees to build products that target children as young as 6 to expand its user base. Now, just from the headline and just from that alone, I can imagine that Facebook was hiring for their Instagram Kids product that they were supposed to bring out, but they dropped thanks to the backlash that they got. But yeah, it looks like they were really trying to recruit people who could target that young of a demographic. So they mentioned that our company is making a major investment in youth and has spun up a cross-company virtual team to make safer, more private experience for youth that improves their households' well-being, theirs and their households' well-being. For many of our products, we historically haven't designed for under 13. Although, let's face it, I'm sure a lot of people under the age of 13 had signed up for Facebook at some point. So Facebook kind of wants everyone to use their product, even though legally not under 13, but holistically, oh yeah, they would love everyone, regardless of age, to use this. Now, in the internal blog post published April 9th, so earlier this year, the author wrote that the company planned to hire several positions as it expands into offering a full range of products to children younger than 13. Diagrams illustrate proposed new target age groups ranging from kids 6 to 9 and tweens 10 to 12, along with existing targets of early teens from 13 to 15 and 16 and 17. So really hitting each one of those demographics. That should be a little scary, saying that these 5 age groups can be used to define education, transparency, controls, and defaults that will meet the needs of young users. The truly honest answer is that, especially the 6 to 9 and even the 10 to 12 as well, they don't need social media. Everyone in their social circle should contact them through their parents and their guardians. It's just insane to me that they would try to make a product that would quote unquote improve their well-being. Admittedly, I don't hang around a lot of 6-year-olds, but I can't imagine a 6-year-old needing to get on social media and trying to use that for education, for socialization. It's just not really something that Facebook should do. And remember, there's a reason that 13 age limit exists, and it's that under 13, and really in a lot of cases under the age of 16, it's very dicey to hold consumer data that pertains to 6-year-olds because they really cannot give consent. Just like anyone here, me, a 30-year-old signing onto Facebook and hitting, yeah, sure, I've read the legalese, I know what I'm getting into. Me giving the consent for Facebook to track and target me, that's one thing. A 6-year-old, though, has none of the knowledge needed to really understand what it is that they're giving away when they do this. And of course, we don't even know what they're actually giving away. It could just be something as simple as location, whereabouts, likes and dislikes, things like that. But it, again, gets them hooked from an early age to never really know. And I would say about 5 and 6 year old, not a childhood development expert at all, but that 5 to 6 year old range, there's a reason why we have kids start kindergarten in that range. And it's when they can actually start to remember and learn. So by getting that 6-year-old, these kids are never going to know a time without social media, without the idea that you can't post your most intimate thoughts and get a reaction from people all over the world. Even in this one, even if it's a super minor curated one, it gets them in the habit of checking social media. It gets them in the habit of feeds. It gets them in the habit of sharing online just their every whim. And from then on, there's no turning back. They don't know anything else that isn't FOMO in some regard. Now, critics of the company say these documents are part of a long-standing pattern of Facebook attempting to attract younger users as early as possible. There you go. It said, quote, they need to focus on cleaning up their existing platform instead of trying to hook more children to their addictive platforms at younger and younger ages. Now, Facebook responded to a request for comment by referring to a blog post it had written with the Wall Street Journal and saying that companies that operate in a highly competitive space, including the Wall Street Journal, make efforts to appeal to younger generations. Considering that our competition are doing the same thing, it would actually be newsworthy if Facebook didn't do this work. Boy, that's a little damning. And the whataboutism, saying, oh, well, what about everyone else? And of course, when you really think about it, who else is out there? Facebook owns WhatsApp, Instagram, and Facebook, of course. It's kind of a head scratcher. They have the 4 billion users. Of course, there are a couple of Chinese companies that, probably have similar numbers, but trying to say, oh, well, the Chinese are doing it, why can't we? Or I should say, the Chinese government is doing it, why can't we? That's very disingenuous. Now, the documents were included in disclosures made to the Securities and Exchange Commission and provided to Congress in redacted form during the whole drag Mark Zuckerberg up to Capitol Hill to respond to this. Now, the post was shared on Facebook's internal message board saying that, quote, we have a few researchers across the company kickstarting this virtual team and are hiring more as this work unfolds. The post lists jobs for categories like Messenger Kids, Youth Platform, and Instagram Child Safety, shared the name of the hiring manager for each role, which was redacted. Messenger Kids is a video calling and messaging app created by Facebook that is currently available for kids. All this is really just kind of scary. Now, obviously, NBC News is showing multiple slides from these pictures that were sent to Congress, and you have things like these 5 age groups are used to define education, transparency, control, and again they show kids 6 to 9, 10 to 12, 13, 15, and all the way up to adults. That's very concerning. Now, they said that these documents make clear that instead of working to make its platforms blah, 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 despite Facebook's claim that their motivation for Instagram for Kids is to create a safer experience for preteens, It's clear that the real reason Facebook is fixated on kids is to drive growth. Facebook products aren't safe for younger children, and a company that consistently puts profits ahead of young people has no business building a platform for kids. This goes into a lot of things. I mean, there's just also the notion that Facebook is no longer for young adults. It's for your parents. It's for older people that, communicate amongst themselves and share terrible memes. Younger teenagers and young adults don't really use Facebook all that often. They're hemorrhaging those user base, so I'm sure that they're still trying to bring back users from that age group, but they're also trying to get even younger. They're trying to get them, as I said before, they're trying to get young kids in a state that they don't know an existence without social media. And by and large, it's working. I mean, I've met multiple parents who have an account for their 1-year-old. That's why things like this is why the metaverse is going to be so scary, but at the same time, just kind of obvious why they're doing it. It is the next step for Meta, I should say. Now, the last Facebook story, and it's not really related other than the fact that it is Facebook. Check this out. Facebook takes down government-run troll farm in Nicaragua. There you go. So Facebook has taken down a government-run troll farm in South American country where multiple government agencies helped run a network of fake accounts and media pages that spanned Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube. They said that in addition to hundreds of fake accounts on its platform, the troll farm also operated a complex network of media brands. They said that some fake accounts posed as government supporters, while some posed as university students who led protests against the government in 2018. The fake accounts also mass-reported activists and other government critics in an attempt to get them banned from Facebook. Beginning in 2019, the group also began posting and artificially amplifying praise about the, about the government and the ruling party. I'm glad that they figured out what many other countries have already, and I would say any developed country has already found out. It's very cheap to run these kinds of campaigns. To make fake accounts, let's face it, making an account is as easy as making an email address, and governments have no end of those. Employees and time and effort, that's all it takes is to really influence a conversation. It only takes a couple of hundred people in the right social circles to really get people talking and thinking in a certain way, hence Cambridge Analytica. Now, while it's not the first time Facebook has caught a government running this kind of operation, they say that this effort was unique because they were linked to multiple government institutions, including the Social Security Institute and the Supreme Court. The country's post office, headquartered, served as a main hub for the troll farm, and government workers even appear to post on a regular 9-to-5 schedule. We saw the same thing with Russia, where on Russian time, the trolls were on a 9-to-5 schedule as well. So, happens all the time, and I'm sure that there are more countries doing it than there are countries not doing an effort like this. So it's but hey, they took it down, and they were at least trying to be transparent about this, that they did take this down. So everyone, that's about all the Facebook news we have, and trust me, we have a lot of stories that aren't Facebook related, but yeah, wanted to clump all of those together. How about we do something fun? And you can check this out on Netflix. I have seen a video. I think I saw a video of this. It might have just been a fever dream, but you can see this here on the video portion. Netflix released a horror movie written by a bot, and it's spectacular. Remember how we were talking about Facebook and data collection, all that good stuff. Well, this is the end result. This is one of the things to fall out of mass data collection, and that is algorithms that can do things on their own. While not studying people, this bot did consume, I believe it was like 400,000 hours of horror movies. 400,000. That's a lot of horror movies. And trust me, I'm sure a lot of those were bad horror movies, and it shows in the end results. They said that earlier this month, Netflix released a horror movie written exclusively by bots. Now that it's Halloween, it's time to share that video. It's terrible. Hilariously terrible, the author writes. Terrible in all the ways you hoped it might be terrible. And of course you can watch it there, and it looks like it was released on Netflix's YouTube page. It's the dialogue is really bad. Let's see if we can play this just a little bit. So, yep, Mr. Puzzles, by the way. If you want to Google this yourself, just look up Mr. Puzzles.
That has outer beauty and inner blood. She dangles over a vat of chair saws. The furniture Payne sits on. This is not a normal Halloween for her.
What is occurring? Where am I? I should be at sexy summer camp.
Yeah, so it's obviously the... So how I think this went down, the script itself was written by bots, and they had their visual artists, their film creators create all of the art assets that they needed, such as like table saws, and it's just saws on tables that are spinning around. It looks ridiculous. The voices were done with like Microsoft Sam type simplicity, and overall it gave this thing a very trippy, like it kind of makes sense, but then it really doesn't, and it has all the obvious cliche twists to it that you could possibly have, with a nice little sprinkle of just the insane. It's really a fun watch. They said that Netflix worked with Keaton Patty, who had done this bot thing before. This time around, again, 400,000 hours of horror movies to create Mr. Puzzles Wants You to Be Less Alive is the name of the movie. They said that it focuses on Mr. Puzzles, who was clearly based on the movie Saw. He's a bad guy attempting to kill people via elaborate setups that make no sense. And saying that they have a couple of quotes here. And as a journalist constantly stressed about being replaced by robots, it's relieving to see that when it comes to writing to stories written by bots, we're not quite there yet. We're not too far off, but we're safe for now. And yeah, it makes sense second to second. Does it make sense from minute 1 to minute 5? No, not at all. The tangents are completely random. But second to second, the bot does a pretty good job of stringing together a horror movie. And again, it's a horror movie, but it's also hilarious. You can definitely check that out. And you can find that in, we'll include a link in the show notes over at Computer America. So, nice little fun one. Not so fun, but kind of about a fun topic. Check this out. Roblox comes back online. I know that a lot of you were really worried about that. Roblox comes back online after a 3-day outage. For those who don't know, Roblox is huge. And if you don't know what it is, or if you've never played it, well, it's because you're just not part of that age group. You know, you're probably not between the ages of 8 and 14. But for those who are, this is a pretty big deal. Saying that Roblox is finally returning after a 3-day outage. And the gaming platform's developer said it was incrementally bringing regions back to service after having pinpointed the cause roughly 3 hours earlier. The company had a possible candidate on October 30th, but didn't narrow it down until a day later. The company didn't detail the cause, unfortunate, but had previously ruled out particular experiences or partnerships. Some had blamed the outage on a Chipotle promo that launched half an hour before the failure took place. So whatever the reason for the outage, and if it's anything like some of the other recent outages we've seen, in particular, I want to say Facebook was actually the last one to do this. They had a misconfigured IP scheme, and it just took like 24 hours to actually get it all sorted out. Probably something like that. They said that whatever the reason for the outage, it may have had a lasting effect. Roblox has had over 40 million daily users and has been home to major concerts in recent months. That could leave more than a few frustrated kids, not to mention parents and creators, wondering about the long-term reliability of the platform. I will say, a simple 3-day outage, that's bad. It's not unheard of in the gaming industry. And yeah, there you go. So with that being said, so the developer of Roblox has shared more information about what caused it, saying that this was an especially difficult outage and that it involved a combination of several factors. A core system in our infrastructure became overwhelmed, prompted by a subtle bug in our backend service while under heavy load. This was not due to any peak in external traffic or any particular experience. Rather, the failure was caused by the growth in the numbers of servers in our data center. The result was that most services at Roblox were unable to effectively communicate and deploy. They are a victim of their own success, or so they say. It might also be a hacker and DDoS attack and things like that, but yep, they're back up and running. Not often you see one of the biggest games, again, 40 million daily active users, just go blackout like that. That's definitely something very, very uncommon. Okay, how about a few different stories here? This is a pretty big one in terms of business. Also in terms of open source, VMware. Dell spins off VMware for $64 billion. Well, I should say the $64 billion company as it battles debt hangover. So PC pioneer Michael Dell is set to cap his climb back to the top of the computing world Monday with one of the largest corporate spinoffs. Dell Technologies will shed its 81% stake in publicly traded VMware, creating an independent software company with a stock market value of nearly $64 billion. Dell's remaining hardware operations have an implied value of $33 billion based on its latest share price. So yeah, that's going to give Dell a lot of extra money to cover a lot of its debts. The transaction, first disclosed in April, completes an 8-year saga where they turned his $3.8 billion interest in an out-of-favor PC maker into a personal stake in a broader data center hardware and software empire worth $40 billion. So beginning with the buyout of his PC company, Dell went on to devour server and storage company EMC for $67 billion before taking the group public in 2018. So Silver Lake, the Silicon Valley private equity group that helped mastermind the deal making, will be left with stakes in Dell and VMware, both worth $11 billion. Pretty good. After the spinoff, Dell will be a simpler company with a better capital structure. In other moves to try to appeal to a wider group of investors, Dell has said it will start paying a dividend. So there you go. So money. Wall Street has also been wary of the complex financial engineering used to hold together the heavily indebted group. A year ago, after deducting the value of its VMware stake, Dell shares price ascribed virtually no value to its remaining tech hardware business. Thanks partly to the plans for VMware, Dell shares have since risen about 80%. So it's that's actually pretty funny. So the stake in VMware was about all of the value that Dell computers was worth. And now that they have made plans over the past 6 months to spin VMware off as a company, that left people saying, well, I guess there is kind of value to Dell. So yeah, and of course, VMware itself is going to be pretty expensive as it is, because if there's one thing that we've seen, it's one thing to collect data, sell services, and kind of provide services for the everyday person, but the real money maker seems to be providing the server space for other companies to do their services in. It's one thing to use the road. It's another thing to own the road completely. And that's what VMware that's what VMware really excels at. So VMware, meanwhile, is set to regain its independence 18 years after it was bought by EMC for less than $1 billion. In what turned out to be one of the most successful tech acquisitions, the separation from Dell will free it from the company's focus on corporate data centers and give it more freedom to invest and make acquisitions, focusing on cloud computing. That's what the president of VMware said. So if you like VMware, if you like what they do, maybe a bit more independence from Dell is going to be a good thing. And then for Dell, maybe a bad thing, but of course, with this divested stake, they're going to be able to take all that money, clear their debts, and get back to making hardware. So Dell on a comeback, maybe, who knows? There was a trend, didn't partake in it myself. I had enough of Pokemon cards back when I was a kid, but thanks to influencers and YouTube and good old nostalgia, Pokemon cards became very popular once again during the pandemic when people were looking for things to do, and one of those hobbies was recollecting old Pokemon cards. Now, a Georgia man, and of course, with COVID happening, a lot of money went out to a lot of people for a lot of things. COVID relief and, spurring businesses. One of those was a Georgia man who admitted to using federal COVID-19 relief funds to purchase a rare Pokemon card for $57,789. There you go. One mystery that has remained, however, is what card they purchased and whether fraud notwithstanding, whether this was a good investment. So Motherboard, with the help of a reader, has found the auction, which was from a BGS graded 9.5 first edition base set Charizard. It's always Charizard. That's always the most expensive one. The card was sold on the PWCC auctions on December 28th, 2020. And hey, they actually have it right here. If you're watching the video portion, you can see it right there. Sold for $57,789, and it's a mint condition base set Charizard, holographic, of course. Could you imagine if it wasn't holographic? Yep, sure was. Okay. So they said that now that we know the specifics, it is the opinion of Motherboard editor-in-chief and semi-professional Pokemon card salesman, Jason Kobler, that this was a reasonable and perhaps even good investment. The grading company at issue is Beckett Grading Services, which is notoriously the toughest card grading service out there. It's possible, they're saying that it's often equivalent to a PSA 10, which is the most popular grading service. It's possible to get a 9.5 card regarded as a 10 by PSA, and a lot of people do this. A year ago, a PSA 10 first edition Charizard, so essentially a card in the same vein as this, same quality, condition, sold for about $360,000. Just before that, the rapper Logic bought one for $220,000. Again, pieces of cardboard and plastic are selling for what many houses sell for. Nice houses too, not even like crappy houses, nice houses. So getting a BGS 9.5 first edition Charizard for $60,000 then was a steal, especially if you could get it regraded as a 10. So essentially, they bought it for $60,000, and some of the same cards were selling for $200,000 to $300,000+. There you go. Anyways, they applied for and received $85,000 in aid from Washington, according to the Macon Telegraph. The unlawful taking of taxpayer dollars is always disgusting, but in this context, the taking from emergency relief funds to help our neighbors and their businesses is outrageous. And they mentioned that I want the hard work of citizens of this district to continue to work with law enforcement partners to hold accountable those who would fraudulently obtain and misuse relief funds. So it took $85,000 in COVID relief funds, spent it on Pokemon cards. Don't get me wrong, I have definitely heard people collecting Pokemon cards. But to use COVID relief funds, that's a new low. But there will always be fraud like that. Okay, speaking of fraud, how about we talk about Wikipedia? And I promise, I'm not going to ask you to donate $5, even though you probably should donate $3 or $5 or whatever it is. But Wikipedia in Chinese editing war of words. There you go. You can imagine that the subject of China, where they want to, there's a reason the Great Chinese Firewall exists. China and the Chinese government wants to control the narrative. If something is wrong as they see it, then they need to change it. Within their own intranet, they have the full authority to do that. They can and do block many services, many companies, even ideas and pictures from circulating on the Chinese internet by and large. Now, when it comes to the rest of the internet, they don't have as much influence, but one of the nice things about Wikipedia is that anyone can become a trusted contributor and start editing Wikipedia at large. And that's where you get into kind of a war of philosophies between people who are pro-China and people who are see the world a little bit different. Now, they say that Wikipedia's ability to retain balance on Chinese issues has been called into question following the global platform's ban preventing several mainland Chinese editors writing and updating pages. So against the backdrop of tensions between Hong Kong and mainland China, back in 2019-2020, this turned into a war of words on Wikipedia. Anyone can edit most Wikipedia pages, but only a fraction of users tend to do so, and only some of those are on a regular basis. And I mean, that's what made Wikipedia so great. But those few super users who edit these pages, I mean, let's face it, most of us just go there and read and digest what it is that we're seeing. Very, very few people actually go in and do the due diligence, cite their sources, and contribute to Wikipedia. So the few that do have immense power over a lot of people. Matters came to a head in September when Wikipedia's governing body banned 7 active pro-Beijing editors and removed the administrative powers of a further 12, which again is pretty unprecedented when it comes to Wikipedia. They just generally don't do that kind of thing. You know, they don't say, oh, people from this region are forbidden to contribute on these topics. But pro-Beijing voices taking part in a BBC Click investigation say the actions will mean that narratives relating to China and Hong Kong will be biased towards a Western viewpoint. And that's really the question. Is it biased? And if it is biased, should we allow someone else to put their spin on it? The way that Wikipedia is supposedly, has always gotten around biases is that you have to support, or you have to cite sources. You have to support what you write in Wikipedia with direct sources from outside websites. if they have issue with that, they can report it, have it reviewed, and if it withstands, then, hey, you may not like what it says, but if it's supported and it's factual, it needs to stay. They're saying, quote, Wikipedia, especially Chinese Wikipedia, is a balance. They say a former administrator of the site. He has been banned from the platform, but he denies misusing it, saying that you're removing pro-Beijing voices, and so the balance is going to tilt towards anti-Beijing forces within Wikipedia. However, the founder, Jimmy Wales, says that the platform's principles of freedom of expression and neutrality apply globally. Saying that, Mr. Wales saying that I have deep experience of talking to people all over the world, and the idea that people in China, for example, are so brainwashed that they can't see that neutrality is just false. So many people are able to say, here's my view of the world, but there are other viewpoints, and an encyclopedia should present an explanation of those viewpoints in a fair way. Again, that's kind of Wikipedia's bread and butter, is presenting everything, but with a source. If you don't source it and you don't, you can say that, oh, these numbers are disputed, or this happened, but this didn't happen. If you can say that something like Tiananmen Square, for example, happened, and you can provide a source, which there are a lot of sources for it, you can't just wipe that out and say that didn't happen. It's not biased against your viewpoint. It's just what happened. So now the edit wars, the investigation by BBC Click uncovered edit wars between pro-Beijing and pro-democracy editors on issues relating to Hong Kong, largely on the Chinese language site, but also on the English version. Now, they say that, they're saying that pro-Beijing people often remove content that is sympathetic to protesters, such as tear gas being fired and images of barricades. They also add their own content. But he acknowledges that edit wars happen on both sides. Pro-democracy editors tend to add content to shift the balance or the tone of the article, but in my experience, the pro-Beijing editors are a lot more aggressive in churning out disinformation, saying that it's now unfixable without external interference. Someone is trying to rewrite history. There you go. So, the article goes into a bit how the Wikipedia users from China who were banned tried to use VPNs to circumvent the government's block on the site, and circumvent the ban that Wikipedia had put on these users as well. So we're not going to get too much further into that. Meanwhile, they say that, meanwhile, Mr. Yan says that helping to build a new platform that will be representative of the Beijing viewpoint, albeit one that will be state-censored. This will be in addition to Baidu and another Chinese company, which currently rival Wikipedia in China, saying that people will have a better platform to write about encyclopedia articles. But Jimmy Wales maintains that his site can still be a viable source of quality information on the country if people are given proper access. Saying, quote, the biggest thing that's preventing mainland Chinese people from expressing the viewpoint of mainland Chinese people is the Chinese government, who don't allow them to edit Wikipedia. The idea that we are excluding China is absurd. We welcome them with open arms. So, yeah, they're not shooting things down simply because they are from China. It's just that these Chinese users, these power users, the administrators and the editors are trying to churn out misinformation over a particular set of events. So, if you can't back it up, it's not stifling your viewpoint. It's more just saying the truth. Okay, so let's see. In this article, I think this is what I'm thinking of. And when it comes to fake meat, or at least lab-grown meat, this was the question that I always pose to people because it's a fun little thought experiment. This one from BBC News, and it's can you stomach the latest emerging food innovations? And this gets into a lot about it, but check it out. They say that as world leaders gather in Glasgow and prepare to chow down at numerous buffets, food technologists urgently want them to grasp the role alternative proteins might play combating climate change. And yeah, here's kind of one of the fun things. It's scientists start by harvesting muscle cells from an animal. Nutrients are steadily then added to feed those cells and grow the meat into tissue. This stew is called the cell media, which is then cultivated. And San Francisco startup Eat Just is now selling its lab-grown chicken nuggets in Singapore, a move that's part of the country's long-term security strategy so it can be less dependent on its neighbors for food imports. Now, one of these, though, and I'm trying to... It's talking about the growth of it, how conventional meat, that cultivated meat could drop to compete with conventional meat by 2030. I will say, I don't think it's going to be 2030 by the time lab-grown meat is price-wise competitive with classic meat. I think these things always tend to build up steam and get better and better and better, faster and faster. I would say it's going to be much before 2030. Now, the life cycle study showed cultivated meat is also projected to comprise a staggering 35% of the global meat market by 2040, which is actually great. You have billions of people to feed, and let's say if the entire country of China decides that they have a great need for sushi, 1.4 billion people suddenly all desiring sushi, that's going to have a major effect on the world's oceans. But if you can artificially print those, that's going to be great. Now, let's see, print a burger, so on and so forth. Okay, I'm not seeing the exact article. Human meat burger. Let's see. Okay, a woman found a human finger in a hamburger. Now, imagine instead of accidentally finding a finger, imagine instead you had a chef who wanted to serve a human meat burger. And that's the question that we're going to start wrestling with, is that, well, obviously eating people is bad, but what if you eat human meat that was never actually part of a human? That's the thought experiment. I would be curious as to what everyone out there would think about that. Ethically, I mean, it's probably safe, maybe. Of course, eating human meat itself is probably very not safe. But if it never, like ethically speaking, if it never came from a person and, yeah, you could eat it, I think it'd be kind of gross. Obviously, it's something that hopefully the vast majority of people have never eaten before in their lives, and hopefully they wouldn't develop a taste for it. But then the other question comes into, what if you do develop a taste for it? What if you do find out that you actually do really like human meat? Boy, that sounds like a great way to have a lot of therapy sessions on an ongoing basis. So, yeah. Can humans stomach the latest emerging food innovations? Kind of gross, but also very thought-provoking. Okay, so some of the articles that we didn't get to, we have about a minute left, and I wanted to talk about some of these, such as the Apple is reportedly working on a way for iPhones to detect car crashes and auto-dial 911. This comes on the heels, of course, of similar features where you have a situation like Apple Watches and Apple phones being able to automatically detect falls. Instead of falls, though, you would have car crashes. Let's see, so Apple's mixed reality headset might play high-quality VR games, and the headset could launch next year. Would make sense that they would get into that space as well. Microsoft reclaims the title of most valuable company after Apple falls a bit, and you're looking at Microsoft worth about $2.5 trillion, whereas the Apple is only worth a measly $2.46 trillion. Mega cap corporations is pretty crazy. Some other stories here, we might cover them tomorrow. Everyone have a great day. Thank you so much for tuning in. Everyone, see you next time. Bye-bye.